Here we are with block 3 of our miniature block of the month for 2022, and it is the spinning star. As you can see over here is the sample. It will appear here in our quilt, and thus if you are using alternating light colors, this is light number 2 for this project. It will be indicated in your handout. A couple things to note about this. When we look at the pattern itself, it is now one step more than the last time. Our previous 2 blocks were 4 patches. We had 4 blocks repeated, and then we sewed 2 together, and we sewed pairs and then sewed those together, and that's a typical 4 patch. This one is also a 4 patch, but can be assembled in 2 different ways. This one, and in my sample here, I have done the same method of piecing the blocks once completed as a 4 patch, and thus end up with this pressing in the center when we do the pinwheel press. So 2 were sewn together at the top, 2 in the bottom, and then those were joined. In the pattern itself, as you see here, we could actually sew 2 triangles together and 2 triangles together and put them together along this seam and then that seam. I think I'm going to do that as we go forward when we're putting the pieces together, and then we'll see what the difference is with the pressing compared to this one. Also in preparation, we'll notice that these triangles, now this is my piece, my second copy. I've taken the 2 out that are opposite each other for purposes of making templates. And here's one of them here. So our A block is up here. When we cut the seam allowances off out of our original pattern, these are the sections from copy number 1 that I will be using to sew the fabric to. So we notice in this pair here that they are mirror image in terms of the pieces. So 3 here, A3 and E3 are opposites. They're mirror images. The template is identical but reversed, but we are using different fabrics in each of these, so the cutting will be a little more tricky. As well, A2 and E2 are the same, A1 and E1 are the same, but mirror again. And this is repeated 4 times, this pair. So it seems sensible to me to put it together as a 4 patch. That's much more common, but the process of building each of this is going to be the same no matter what. We do know, and I did number them so that A and B and C and D are identical. So we were going to be doing these at the same time. I would. You don't have to. You can do them any order you like. But for the purposes of cutting and stacking, I think it's simpler to work it this way. Then E, F, G, and H are also identical. They look like little sailboats. All right, so I got our 2 stacks. It's made up of, each block is made up of 2 right angle triangles. A little bit of math here for us. And I just learned today when I looked it up, this is an obtuse triangle. So the angle here is bigger than 90 degrees. So they're a bit odd, and I have chosen to put, even though these are right angle triangles, typically I would want the right angles to be in the corner, but as these will be the outside edges, my preference would be for piecing it all together to have the straight of grain along the outside edges of these pieces. It's a very small little patch and does give some freedom, but it's best, I think, to work that way. Particularly the patterns will be, if there's any angle, you can see there's a bit of direction in this. I'm not sure if you can see too clearly. And I wasn't piecing them in that direction. I did use a right angle here, and that's okay. You can do that. I think structurally it will be better and not have as much stretch on these outside edges here if we put the right angle there. So I wouldn't do it this way, but it can be done this way. So live and learn. Let's cut our background pieces. We know that there are mirror images, our A and the E which are the opposites here, can be cut at the same time with right sides together. So what I suggest doing is cutting a piece that will allow for 4 of them to be cut at the same time of each style. And I have the other 2 from this section here already placed on my stacking board. This is just a piece of plastic that I'm using for demonstration purposes. It's from a page protector, such as this, glossy and shiny. I just trimmed all the edges off of these sides so that I had a clean sheet, and then that was just handy to have. I use that plastic in so many different ways, and you might find that a helpful tip. So we're going to separate them as the diagram illustrates, and this is from you can cut 2 of each out of a 2 3/4 by 3 1/4 rectangle, right sides together. And then we can take them to our design kind of stacking board, which I have just put a piece of batting on a wool covered cutting, actually piece of wood. So when we take these over here, we've got our A1, and that'll be the top one here. This is the wrong side facing, and then we'll put the opposite one here, and you can pin these on once they're all stacked. So the top one, the bottom one, and then that's the extra. And we'll do a similar thing for the next couple of pieces. So let's do. Our number 2 and 3 pieces are going to be cut from both fabrics at the same time. Our number 2 here, the medium is on top, right sides down, and our dark is right side up. So when we stack these as if we were cutting them individually, we see that we can cut them simultaneously with the fabric positioned this way. So I've done the same sort of pattern as last time with the alternating pieces, and I've indicated here, it will be in your handout too. A 3 by 2 1/4 is a rectangle that will allow us to cut 2, and then another pair. And the same for our number 3 piece, a little bit wider, requires a little bit larger rectangle. A 3 inch by 2 1/2 will give us enough space to add 3/8 to our template for cutting. So then we can take our design board, stacking board. I'll have to give it a special name, I think. So these are our number 2 pieces. Our top one is going to be for the A, and this of course be upside down. A is on this side, B is on this side, or not B, but the second set of 4 is going to be E in this case, as our A, B, C, and D are going to be stacked for here, and the E, F, G, and H are stacked on this side. So go ahead and put those all in place, stack them up, and our number 3, our A's will be on this side, our second set will be on that side. And then we can take them to the sewing machine and get ready to sew. In order to create a flat seam between our number 1 and number 2 pieces that we can press open, I'm going to show you how to do that rather than the typical way that we would do it, which would push all our seams to one side in the process of construction. So we know that we cut these with the right side of our template facing. So if we arrange our D1 and our D2 pieces from our setup board as if we had just cut them, we can see that they are going to go right sides together. That's how we would be sewing them if we had our fold, for example. This is how we would typically sew them. We're going to do it without the paper because we know the seam is going to be from one end all the way to the other of these 2 pieces. So we'll set our board pieces aside and our template. Now it would be best at this point to have our 1/4 inch foot which you can leave on for all your construction if you find that you can see the lines fine. Let's give that a try. Okay, we've got our 1/4 inch foot. If we had folded this part to get our crease of our paper, this is how our setup would be typically. And if you like, you can use the paper for a guide. Just lay it on there, but we are going to sew a 1/4 inch on these two pieces. All right. Now at this point we can open them and press them. And this is just a handy way to be able to plan where your seams will be. It's almost like having to look at it in reverse order as to where they're going to end up. But I've done a couple of these, and I think that this way gives us the flattest piece to work with. Okay, now we would be sitting with our right sides out. If we had been sewing it as normal, we would have our seams both going this way, and they would be pressed to one side. Now we have them open, so we're just going to slip this along that seam. So let's do our next fold and then set that up. So we're going to pretend this is our starting point, basically. This is going to be as if these two pieces were number 1, and we're going to add our 3rd one, which would be number 2. I know that's confusing. You'll see. Okay, so then we would be setting this up, and in doing our little check with a pin here for that intersection. Oh, gotta make sure I get it through all the way. We're going to line it up 1/4 inch, but we're going to put it right on that seam. And at the same time, we're going to line up the top of this with the seam up here. So we can do another pin to find that hole. Once we have the hole, we can see where it is, line it up. And for the time being, we could put a pin in here too, just to keep it in place. Really close, close enough. It's a little bit of tricky finagling here to get it all set up. This is where we would be cutting our edge for the 1/4 inch, which is right there. We'll take our last triangle and our corner is from here. Again, I'll put a pin in so you can see. I lost my pin here. So we have a 1/4 inch there. The other triangle part is here, so it's going off this end. Let's put a mark. And then there's the long side. So we know that this wider angle of that triangle is going to be underneath here. So we can get our alignment. It's all nicely lined up. We'll open our paper, and I'm leaving my 1/4 inch foot on so you can see that it will work as well. It's a little harder to see the line, but it will work. Okay, pins over there. Now we can get our nice press on here. Now it's ready for a nice heavy press with a larger iron and then a trimming up. Might want to encourage that a little bit that way. Let's just try it again with our next couple of pieces. So our usual fold would be here. Oh, this way. One on the left, two on the right. We're just going to have it as a guideline for our 2 pieces to sew. So A1 would be going this way, because this is the right side down. And number 2 piece, our right angle is here with the right side down. So these 2 are going together, right sides together. We have our 1/4 inch foot, and we'll see if we can get a tidy setup on this one. Now I did try a little bit of glue on one, but I found it was kind of cumbersome, so I don't advise. Unless you're better with glue than I am, it seems to stick to everything once I take it out. We'll press these open. And again, you can go ahead with our typical construction if you find that's a little bit easier to do. So we have our 2 and our 1 and our 2 blocks put together. Let's get our fold on here. Ooh, it's kind of slim. We haven't pinned it yet, so we can make as much seam allowance here as we like. So let's find our crease intersection pin in here. We'll get that lined up. And the other end, we've got a fold in our paper. Actually, we can see where that's going. Got a bit of shadow for you here. I'll try to get that out of the way. Keep that one in there. Try to get that pin in here. Okay. That should hold it at the top. Got this one. Let's trim this off now. And then we can make sure it's lined up again. Oh, it looks pretty good. Got a nice edge there. Make sure our dot, I can just see the tiny pinhole here, so I'm going to leave that in position. And now our big angle is on the top again with this right side up. It's matching up to the shape of this piece that we're going to be sewing along this edge. I can see my blue part is sticking out beyond to match up with that. And I want to be sure I have enough so that it's sticking on just beyond this paper part here, a little beyond this paper part here, and my dot is aligned. Again, you could check it with your pin if you like. Right here. Oh. So it's going right through there. Let's get our number 3 piece underneath here. Paper open, pin out. we go. Got a little bit of extra fluff here. Just a quick crease before we take it to be pressed heavily and then squared up. Okay, these two will be pressed and squared up and then sewn together. Once all 8 of our pattern pieces have been completed with fabric sewn, we're going to square up our triangles. This one has been done. This is how I did it. Using the right angle of our ruler, aligning on the sewing line, the solid line, both the side and the top, gives us a complete and accurate right angle. By rotating it to give us the long side on our cutting side, we can use the diagonal mark on our ruler as well as the 1/4 inch mark on our sewing line. It's more important to have that as our guide than the actual dashes on the paper. Give it a quick trim and set that aside. We're going to remove the paper. You'll notice I kept these little tags on, and I find it's helpful to keep them in until everything's assembled and we can cut dog ears off after. So once we remove the paper, we're going to take it back to the ironing board and press this seam open so that all of our seams are open, and we can arrange it with our pair for the square, and then press your seams together. This one is open as well. Doesn't matter which side you're sewing it on, everything's open on each side. And we can use a little clip if we wish to hold that in place. It might be easier this way. It gives us a little bit more to get going. Pinch these together, make sure those sides are all even. Sew that seam, and once that's done, press this one open as well. And again, pressing with your fingers first to get into a bit of an opening, and then straight down with your iron with a bit of steam or a bit of bus press and then a dry iron. Once those are all pressed, you'll have 4 squares that look like this. And again, we can do a squaring up by using, I'm going to put this on the diagonal. And I have trimmed just the smallest amount off this, but I wanted to be sure the dot here is the 1/4 inch mark. There's a dot here that's a 1/4 inch mark on that intersection, and a dot here that is also a 1/4 inch mark. Trimmed off those 2 sides first, because these are the ones important for construction. This one is going to be less to worry about. Once we rotate it, we'll just make sure that the entire block is 2.5 inches exactly. As long as this diagonal is on this line, this will match with the other pieces. So then go ahead and construct your 4-patch, 2 pairs of 2, line them all up so you can see what they look like, and then we'll put them together. Here are 2 of our sample blocks. This block number 3, the spinning star. The original one was pieced in the usual way with the seam allowances in construction of each segment being pressed the way that they came out in the construction process, except that we alternated these last seams between the 2 and the 3rd one. We've pressed them opposite so that we can get a flat intersection here, which makes it nice and smooth. And then our 4-patch was constructed in pairs, pressed opposite, so they nestle, and then to keep the spinning wheel, gives us this pinwheel, which is nice and flat in the center. This one was constructed with all of our seams open during the process and partway through, and as well the 4-patch constructed with everything open. The challenge with this one was a little more difficult to get this intersection clean. Because they didn't nestle, it was difficult. I did take a few stitches out on either side to get that across and where I wanted it. But in the long run, even though this is bulkier in the center than this one, when pressed really well, the edges, the side seams here, this intersection, and the corners are much flatter in this one where they were pressed open. So for constructing this one into the quilt itself with the other blocks, this will be a little easier to work with. There will be less bulk. It's still possible to go ahead with this because it's made this way. I'm going to be putting it in this way, and it'll just require a little more care in stitching and pressing. But it'll work fine. And for your information, here's the one also that I tried. I mentioned trying it out doing diagonal. I had a lot of trouble maintaining the control of the seams in this one. When I did this, I sewed to make this triangle 4 times, and so I was doing a diagonal kind of 4-patch, you can see here. So this was the pairs. There was a diamond here, and this one was a square, and I put our triangle, and I put those 2 together and these 2 together, and then sewed the one across. But you can see that it's really not a very accurate one. There's quite a bit of fabric that needs to be trimmed, and the corners are not at all as tight and clean. We got a little carried away, but the diagonal here really made it a challenge. Even with a good spray and careful stitching, it really was a difficult one to control. This was much cleaner and crisper using the 4-patch, the 2 squares and the 2 squares. This one was done in triangles so that this seam here was the last one. And it got a little crazy. So I wouldn't advise that. It was good for a challenge, and if you want to give it a try, see what you could do with it. Perhaps it'll work for you. I don't even want to square this one up just yet. I'm going to see what happens if I'll use it elsewhere. I had also found in the process of creating this one first that I had wanted to use my light number 2, the alternating light, so that when I did this one, it's now correct to the pattern that I'd like to have. So I hope you enjoy putting it together. There are some challenges with this, as there will be with a number of them, but remember, it's the whole effect that is going to be spectacular.